She was on her knees scrubbing the floor of room 7 when the elevator doors opened and the man she had spent 6 years trying to forget walked out in a $12,000 suit. She did not breathe. She did not move. She just stayed there on her knees, her hand still wrapped around that mop handle, her heart doing something violent inside her chest that no medical textbook had a name for, because this right here, was the thing she'd been running from for 6 years, 2 months, and 14 days, and now it was standing 15 feet away from her in Italian leather shoes, talking to a man in a white coat, completely unaware that the woman who had destroyed his life was crouched behind a laundry cart trying to make herself smaller than she had ever been. His name was Marcus Kane, and 6 years ago, on the most important morning of his life, she had left him standing at the altar in front of 400 people, a 5-tier wedding cake, and a string quartet playing a song. He had chosen himself because he remembered she cried the first time she heard it. She had walked out of that church and never looked back. Or at least, that is what she needed him to believe. Before we go any further, if this story is already pulling at something inside you, do us a favor. Subscribe to this channel right now. Share this video with someone who loves a story that hits different. Drop a comment below and tell us, did she do the right thing? We will be right here waiting. Now let's go back. Her name was Vivian Cole, and she had not always been a hospital aide. She had once been the kind of woman that people describe with words like radiant and electric, and the kind of beautiful that made strangers pause mid-sentence. She had a business degree, a laugh that could fill a room, and a future so bright that people who loved her would squint when they talked about it. She had also had a mother dying of a disease that ate money the way fire eats paper. And she had had a man, a young man back then, not yet the Marcus Kane the world would later know, but already someone extraordinary, who would have given her anything she asked for. She knew that. She had known it from the very first week they were together. The way he looked at her like she was the answer to a question he hadn't even known he was asking. That was exactly why she could not tell him the truth. Because the truth, 6 years ago, would have cost him everything. So instead, she had written him a note, 6 words. She had rehearsed longer versions. She had written pages. She had sat at the desk in the bridal suite of the Fairmont Hotel, in a dress that cost more than her first car, with her bouquet wilting beside her, and she had tried to explain what she was about to do and why, and she could not find a way to do it without destroying him differently. So she had boiled it all down. 6 words. I'm sorry. I just don't love you. And then she had handed it to the flower girl's mother and told the woman to deliver it to the groom, and she had walked out the side door into the alley behind the hotel, and she had sat on a dumpster in her wedding dress, and she had cried until there was nothing left inside her. That was 6 years ago. Now she was here, room 7 of the Kane Medical Center's private wing, which was, as it turned out, the hospital that Marcus Kane had built with the very money she had freed him to make. Because that is what she had done, though she would never say out loud, never claim it like a credit, never use it to make herself feel better in the long nights that came after. She had freed him, and she had paid for that freedom every single day since. She needed this job. The job paid $19 an hour. She got full benefits. The benefits covered a specific pediatric specialist on the 4th floor who had agreed to see a specific 6-year-old girl every 3 weeks and not ask too many questions about insurance gaps. That little girl was the reason Vivian Cole was on her knees in room 7. That little girl was the reason Vivian Cole had applied to 12 hospitals in this city before landing here, before sitting across from a hospital administrator who never once looked up from his clipboard and said you're hired, and handed her a laminated badge and sent her to orientation without ever knowing that the woman he had just hired had once been engaged to the man whose name was carved in marble above the front entrance. Vivian had seen that name the first morning she arrived for work. She had stood on the sidewalk for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. She knew, because she counted, looking up at those letters, Kane Medical Center. And then she had breathed in, breathed out, pulled her badge lanyard over her head, and walked through those doors. Because the little girl needed her to. That little girl's name was Cora. Cora was 6 years old, and she had her mother's cheekbones and her mother's stubborn bottom lip, and her mother's tendency to fall asleep mid-sentence when she was tired. She also had her father's eyes. They were the kind of eyes you noticed. A specific shade of dark gray, almost slate, almost the color the sky gets in that narrow window between storm and clearing. Deep set, serious even when the face was smiling. The kind of eyes that looked at you like they were deciding something important. Marcus Kane had those eyes. So did Cora. Vivian had known this. She had always known this. She had looked at her daughter on the day she was born, in a county hospital 3 states away with no one holding her hand. And she had seen those eyes open for the first time, and she had said, very quietly, so that no one else in the room could hear her, I know, I'm sorry, I love you, I know. And then she had kissed her daughter's forehead and begun the long work of building a life for 2 people out of the rubble of the life she had burned down. She had done it, not gracefully, not without help from food pantries and church basements, and the kind of strangers who leave $5 bills in coat pockets at Goodwill. Not without nights that lasted so long, they seemed to have no morning on the other side. But she had done it, and now she was here, in his hospital, on her knees, and he was 15 feet away. She kept her head down. Her mop moved. Her hands did the thing they had learned to do, the job, the task, the next motion, while her brain ran calculations at a speed that made her dizzy. He was here for a board meeting. She knew that. The staff had been talking about it for 2 days. Mr. Kane is coming. Mr. Kane hasn't visited the private wing in months. Make sure everything is spotless. Make sure the flowers in the reception alcove are fresh. Make sure the lighting in the corridor is adjusted, because apparently Mr. Kane had once commented that it was too harsh. She had heard all of this. She had told herself it would be fine. She had told herself he would be in and out in an hour, and she would keep her head down and her badge tilted and her hair. Her hair was different now, shorter, darker, a practical cut she had given herself in a bathroom mirror with scissors she bought at the dollar store, and she had told herself he would not recognize her. People change in 6 years, and he would have no reason to look twice at a hospital aide on her knees with a mop. And then he turned. Not toward her. Not yet. He turned to say something to the man in the white coat, and the profile of his face hit her like something physical, like a hand pressed flat against her sternum. He was older. Of course he was older. They both were. But where time had taken things from her, had carved things out, had made her leaner and more careful and more tired, time had done something different to him. Time had added things. Weight that was not fat, but authority. A stillness in the way he stood that had not been there before. He had always been handsome in the way young men are handsome, which is to say carelessly, without knowing it. Now he was handsome the way certain buildings are handsome, deliberately, structurally, in a way that suggested every part of him had been put where it was on purpose. He was wearing a charcoal suit. No tie. The collar of his white shirt was open by exactly 1 button, which on any other man would have read as an oversight, and on him read as a decision. He was also, she noticed with a part of her brain that never stopped making clinical observations, tired. Not show tired. Not performing exhaustion for sympathy. Actually tired. There were shadows under those slate-gray eyes that she recognized because she had seen them in her own mirror often enough. The shadows of someone who slept because the body demanded it, not because the mind allowed it. She wondered what kept him up at night. Then she stopped wondering because she knew, she had always known, that some part of what kept him up at night had her name on it, and that thought was too heavy to carry right now, right here, in this hallway, with 12 feet between them. She moved the mop. She kept her head down. She breathed. And then the elevator at the far end of the corridor opened, and a small figure bolted out like a shot, and a voice that Vivian knew better than she knew her own heartbeat shouted one word at full volume. Mama. The world stopped. Not slowed. Not blurred. Stopped. Full stop. Like someone had reached into the machinery of time and grabbed a gear. Vivian straightened so fast she knocked the mop handle against the wall. She spun around. And there was Cora, 6 years old, ponytails unraveling, sneakers lighting up with each step, a crayon drawing clutched in one hand, and an expression of pure uncomplicated joy on her face, running down the hospital corridor toward her mother at full speed. Mama, Cora said again, because she always said it twice when she was excited. Mama, Mama, look what I drew, look at it. It's us, it's you and me, and I gave you a crown, because you're a queen. Mrs. Patterson said I could color however I wanted, and I used every color in the box, every single one, And she crashed into Vivian's legs and wrapped both arms around her knees and held up the drawing, and it was indeed extraordinary. Two figures, one tall, one small, both wearing what appeared to be crowns made of something that might have been flowers or might have been fire, surrounded by a rainbow made with every color in a box of 64 Crayolas. Vivian caught her daughter. She bent down and she caught her the way she always did, automatic, complete, the way her body had learned to make room for the specific small person. She pulled her close. She pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head. She breathed in, and she did not look up. She knew without looking that the hallway had gone quiet. She knew without looking that the man in the charcoal suit had stopped moving. She knew without looking that somewhere in the 15 feet between them, something had shifted. She looked up anyway, because she had never in her life been able to make herself not look when she knew she should not. Marcus Kane was looking at Cora, not at Vivian, not yet, at Cora, and the expression on his face was the kind of expression that Vivian had no name for and no defense against, the kind of expression that lives underneath all the other expressions, the real face beneath the one people show the world, raw and unguarded, and gone in a second as soon as he realized he was making it. But she saw it. It was a second, less, and then his eyes moved up and found hers. And everything that had been merely terrible became something else entirely. He went very still. She knew that stillness. She had studied that stillness for 4 years of her life. It was a stillness he used instead of reacting, the pause he put between feeling something and deciding what to do about it. She had loved that stillness once. She had found it calming when everything else felt like chaos. Right now, it was the most frightening thing she had ever seen. His face did not change. That was almost worse. He looked at her, and his face did not change, and he did not say her name, and he did not move toward her. He just looked, like a man confirming something he already knew, like a man who had run a calculation in his head, and had come to an answer he had not been expecting, and was now deciding what to do with it. Vivian straightened slowly. Cora was still talking. She was always still talking. She was telling her mother about the elevator. She had written it 3 times because the nice lady at the front desk had let her press the buttons. She had pressed 4, 6, and 12 was the highest, and she could see the whole parking lot from the window, and it looked like a toy set, and she was describing the parking lot in detail. The colors of the cars, the patterns. Marcus took 1 step forward. Just 1. Vivian took 1 step back. His eyes moved Cora again. Back to Vivian. Back to Cora. And in those eyes, those specific slate-gray eyes that she had been looking at in miniature every single day for 6 years, she watched the question form. She watched it form, and she watched him stop himself from asking it, because he was Marcus Kane, and Marcus Kane did not ask questions in hospital hallways in front of his medical staff. He was going to ask it somewhere else, which meant she had maybe the length of this hallway, the duration of whatever excuse she could manufacture, whatever logistical mercy the universe might choose to extend to her in the next 60 seconds, to figure out what she was going to say. She had spent 6 years preparing for this moment. She was completely unprepared. "Cora," she said, her voice coming out steadier than it had any right to, "baby, why don't you go back to the waiting area and find Mrs. Patterson? Remember we talked about not running in the hospital?" "But Mama," Cora started. "Go find Mrs. Patterson, baby. I'll be right there." Cora looked up at her mother's face. 6-year-olds are not stupid. They read faces the way adults read books, front to back, detail by detail. Cora read her mother's face right now, and something in her expression changed, went from buoyant to cautious, the way children do when they sense that the adults around them are operating in a frequency they cannot quite hear. "Okay, Mama," she said, and she walked back down the hallway toward the elevator, her sneakers lighting up with each step, her drawing still clutched in one hand. Vivian watched her go. When the elevator doors closed, she made herself turn around. Marcus had not moved. He was looking at her with that same unreadable face, and those readable eyes, and the silence between them had weight and temperature, and she could feel it pressing against her from 12 feet away. "Vivian," he said. Just her name. Just that. And it was somehow the most complicated thing she had heard in 6 years, because there was no anger in it. She had prepared for anger. She had prepared for cold fury, for professional distance, for the specific kind of cruelty that very controlled people deploy when they want wound without appearing to. She had not prepared for just her name said in a voice that sounded like a man who had found something he thought was gone forever and did not yet know if that was good news or the other kind. She stood up straight. "Hi, Marcus," she said. She watched him process that. "You work here," he said. It was not a question. It was a man catching up to a reality that had rearranged itself without his permission. "I do," she said. She kept her voice level. She had practice level. She had spent 6 years practicing level. "How long?" he said. "For months." He nodded, one slow nod. The motion of a man absorbing information. The man in the white coat. Dr. Harrington. She knew him. Everyone knew Harrington. He ran the private wing and had the bedside manner of a well-dressed lamppost. Was standing slightly to the side, looking like he would very much like to be somewhere else. Marcus glanced at him. "Harrington," he said, "I'll meet you in the conference room." Harrington left with the speed of a man who had been handed a gift. And then it was just them. For the first time in 6 years, 2 months, and 14 days, it was just them. She had imagined this. She would be lying if she said she had not imagined this, had not played out in her head on 100 different nights in 100 different variations. What she would say, what he would say, where they would be, who would speak first. She had run through the options so many times that they had worn smooth in her mind, like stones in a riverbed. None of the versions had taken place in a hospital hallway, with a mop between them. "Are you all right?" he said. She blinked. Of all the things she had expected him to say, that was not on the list. "Are you—" she started. She stopped. "That's what you're asking me?" Something moved in his face. Gone before she could name it. "Yes," he said. She almost laughed. The laugh would have been the wrong kind. The kind that comes out when you're too full of feeling. And laughter is the only release valve your body finds in the moment. She pressed it down. "I'm fine," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "That little girl," he said. Vivian's whole body went solid. "She's mine," Vivian said. And then, because she could hear how that sounded, because she could see what was happening in his eyes, "She's my daughter. I'm her mother. She came to visit me at work today. She's not supposed to be in the hallways." He was quiet. "How old is she?" he said. She met his eyes. This was the moment, right here, this specific sentence. This was the fork in the road she had known was coming, that she had known would come eventually, that she had told herself she was ready for. Except you are never ready for fork in the road when you are standing at it with a mop in your hand and your heart making that violent, unnamed motion in your chest. "She is 6, Vivian said. 6, he repeated. "Yes," she said. He did the math. She could see him do it. She could see the calculation move across his face, and then stop somewhere and sit there. And he looked at her, and she looked at him, and neither of them said anything. "What is her name?" he said, finally. His voice was very quiet now, carefully quiet. The kind of quiet that is not the absence of feeling, but the very tight management of it. "Cora," Vivian said. He closed his eyes, just for a second. When he opened them, they were different. Something in them had shifted, and she could not name it, and she had once been able to name everything in this man's eyes. "I need to go," she said. "My shift isn't." "Vivian," he said. She stopped. "We are going to talk," he said, not like a threat, like a statement of fact delivered by a man who has decided something. "Not today, not here, but we are going to talk." She swallowed. "Okay," she said, because she was done running. She picked up her mop. She walked down the hallway. She did not look back. She was done running. But she was also terrified, and the two things coexisted in her chest the whole way to the elevator, the whole ride down to the second floor, the whole walk back to the supply closet, where she stood alone for 4 minutes in the dark among the cleaning supplies and the extra linens, and she pressed her forehead against the cool metal shelf and breathed. "Okay," she told herself. "Okay, now what?" The now what was this? She had a shift that ended at 3. She had a daughter to pick up from the hospital's family waiting area. She had a bus to catch. She had a 6-year-old's dinner to make, a bath to run, a story to read, a small person tuck in and kiss and lie next to until sleep came. She had tomorrow morning and the morning after and the morning after that, and she had a job to keep and a daughter to protect and a life, small and hard won and genuine, that she had built with her own hands out of nothing. She had all of that, and now she had this, too. She straightened up. She turned the supply closet light on. She checked her face in the little mirror on the inside of the door, a trick she had learned early in this job. The mirror had been left by the previous aide, and she had been grateful for it every day since, because this job required a face that said, "I'm fine. I am here. I see you. You can trust me. Whatever is in my own life is parked outside." And she smoothed her expression into that face. Then she went back to work. 3 floors up, Marcus Kane sat in the conference room and looked at the financial reports his team had prepared and did not read a single word of them. He had been in this room before. He had sat at this table before. He had made decisions at this table that had moved money in amounts that would take most people multiple lifetimes to count. He was good at this. He had always been good at this. Right now, he could not read a financial report. His mind kept going back to a hallway, to a face he had spent 6 years trying to forget, and had instead spent 6 years carrying around like something he could not put down no matter how badly his arms ached. To a little girl running, to a pair of eyes. He knew those eyes. He knew them because he saw them every morning in the mirror. He pressed both palms flat on the conference table. He breathed. The thing he was feeling right now was not something he had a name for either, and he was a man who named things. His whole career had been about naming things, identifying problems and naming them and then solving them step by step with the kind of methodical precision that his business school professors had called rare and his competitors called terrifying. He named this now. Possibility. He called it because he did not yet have facts. He had a face and a pair of eyes and a 6-year-old's age and 6 years of math that added up to something he was not yet ready to call by its real name. He would get facts first. He was a man who got facts first. Mr. Kane said one of his team members, the young one, Harrison, the one with the anxious hairline, "Do you want us to start with the West Wing renovation numbers, or—" The pediatric specialist on the 4th floor, Marcus said. Harrison blinked. "Dr. Alvarez, yes, sir?" "Yes, I want his patient list." Harrison went very still. "Sir," he said carefully, patient privacy. "Current patients. Ages 0 to 10. Gender, age, diagnosis category. Nothing that identifies them by name. I want it by end of day." Harrison looked at the table, at his hands, at the table again. "Sir," he said, "the board has very specific guidelines about—" Harrison, Marcus said quietly, "Yes, sir. End of day." "Yes, sir." "Good. Now, let's talk about the West Wing numbers." And Marcus Kane opened the financial report and read every word of it, because he was going to sit in this conference room and do his job, and he was going to do it completely and thoroughly and with his full attention. And then when the meeting was done and his team had left and the floor was quiet, he was going to go find Harrington and ask him some questions that had nothing to do with the hospital's budget. But first, the West Wing. First, the numbers. First, the job. Because Marcus Kane had learned, in the years after she left, in the long, difficult years of rebuilding himself into something functional from the wreckage she had left behind, that the job was the only thing that never betrayed you. The job was always there. The job did not leave you standing at an altar with 400 witnesses and a string quartet and a cake and a ring on your finger. The job stayed. He had learned to love the job for that reason. Not a healthy thing to love. He knew that. He had even paid a therapist for 2 years to help him understand how unhealthy it was and what he should do about it instead. And the therapist had been good, and the insights had been genuine, and he had implemented them with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else, and the result was that he was now a deeply functional person who was also, in the way that deeply functional people sometimes are, deeply alone. He had a team of 240 people who respected him and feared him in equal measure. He had a penthouse apartment in a building he technically owned. He had a mother who called on Sundays and a college roommate who texted on birthdays and 3 or 4 people in the world who might, if pressed, describe themselves as his friends. He did not have the thing that Vivian Cole had given him, briefly. The thing he had not known he was capable of feeling until she showed him. The thing that you can call love, but the word seems thin for it. Seems like a word someone invented before they understood what the thing actually was, before they had any sense of its actual mass and density and the way it changes the physics of everything around it. He had not had that in 6 years. He had looked for it exactly twice. Both attempts had lasted less than a year. Both endings had been amicable and quiet, and had confirmed for him, gently but firmly, that what he had with Vivian had not been something he was going to find again just by looking. So he had stopped looking. He had built a hospital instead. He had built this hospital, the Kane Medical Center, 320 beds, the most advanced pediatric wing in the state, a private care unit that cost more per night than most people earned in a week, because he had believed from the beginning that excellent care should exist, and that if no one else was going to build it, then he was going to build it and find a way to fund both the premium wing and the charity beds on the east side, which was a part of this hospital that nobody photographed for the press releases, but which Marcus considered the real reason the building existed. He had built all of this, and now she was in it, mopping floors. He turned a page in the financial report. 3 floors down, Vivian was changing the linens in room 4, and her hands were moving automatically, the trained motion of a body doing a job it has learned, while her mind was doing something else entirely. Her mind was running through the facts of her situation the same way it had been running through facts for 6 years, because this was what she did when she was scared. She inventoried, she listed, she named the things she knew and the things she did not, and she made a plan out of the gap between them. The things she knew. He was here. He had seen her. He had seen Cora. He had done the math. He was going to want to talk. The things she did not know. What he would do when he knew the truth. What the truth would mean for her job. What the truth would mean for Cora. What the truth would mean for him. What the truth would mean for whatever small, careful life she had constructed out here, away from the person she used to be, out here on the other side of the decision she had made. The truth. She tucked a hospital corner into the mattress with more force than necessary. The truth was complicated. People said that the truth is complicated, and most of the time it is a way of avoiding the truth, a way of making a lie seem more defensible by dressing it in philosophical clothing. But in this case, the truth actually was complicated. The truth had a name, and the name was Dominic Reyes. She had never said that name out loud to anyone who mattered. She had said it to a lawyer once, in a sealed proceeding 3 states away, and the lawyer had looked at her across the table with an expression she could not read, and said, "Are you sure you understand what you're doing?" And she had said yes. And the lawyer had said, "There are other options." And she had said, "I know." And the lawyer had said, "This will cost you considerably." And she had said, "I know." And then she had signed the papers and walked out of that office into the afternoon light. And she had sat in her car for 30 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. Dominic Reyes. She had never told Marcus about Dominic Reyes, and that was the original sin, the thing from which all the other things followed. If she had told him earlier, if she had told him the moment she understood what Dominic was and what Dominic wanted, then maybe the whole sequence of events would have gone differently. But she had not told him, because Dominic Reyes, 6.5 years ago, had sat across from her in a restaurant she could not afford and smiled at her in a way that made her feel like the restaurant had no walls, and had said, in a voice that was pleasant and very quiet, "I know about Marcus Kane's financial situation. I know about the SEC investigation. I know about the offshore accounts his business partner opened in his name. And I know that if that investigation becomes public, Marcus Kane goes to prison." She had sat very still. He had ordered dessert. She had watched him eat it. And then he had said, still pleasant, still quiet, the way predators are quiet. There is a simple solution. You walk away. Before the wedding. You end it cleanly. And I make sure the information about the accounts stays quiet. She had said why. He had smiled. Because Marcus Kane's business partner, he said, is my brother. And my brother is currently being investigated for those same accounts. If Kane is cleared, my brother takes the full weight. But if Kane is gone, if Kane steps back from the company, if Kane is discredited by a very public personal failure, then the investigation loses its primary target, and the focus shifts, and my brother comes through relatively intact. She had looked at him. He had eaten his dessert. "You're asking me to ruin his life," she said. "No," he said. "I'm asking you to save it. The alternative, my alternative, if you don't cooperate, is that I take everything I know to the SEC investigator myself. Marcus goes to prison, probably for 6 to 8 years. The company dissolves. Everything he's built is gone. Versus, you leave, he has a bad few months, and then he rebuilds. He's young. He's capable. He'll rebuild. He'll be fine." She had looked at her hands. She had been wearing her engagement ring. She had been wearing it for 4 months. And she had known, sitting in that restaurant, that he was right about one thing. Marcus would rebuild. She knew it in the way you know things about people you love completely. Not as a fact, but as a certainty. Something deeper than fact. Something structural. Marcus would survive losing her. It would hurt him. Badly. She knew it would hurt him in ways that she could barely stand to think about. But he would survive it. He would rebuild. He was made for rebuilding. He would not survive prison. She was less certain about herself. But she was not the one the calculation was about. So she had gone home that night, and she had sat up until 4 a.m, and she had written her letter, and she had done what she had done. And she had found out 3 weeks later that she was pregnant. She had not told him that either. She had considered it. She had turned it over and over for weeks, for months, during the pregnancy, which was solitary and terrifying and the most alone she had ever felt in her life. She had turned it over constantly. He deserved to know. He was a father. He had a right. But calling him meant contact. Contact meant Dominic Reyes finding out that she had not fully honored her side of the agreement, because Reyes had been very clear that she was to have no contact. Not a call. Not a letter. Nothing. The cleanness of the break was, apparently, part of the structural requirement. She was to be gone, completely and irrevocably gone, and the story was to be simple. She had left him. She did not love him. End of story. Contact meant risk. Risk was not something she could afford with a baby coming. So she had been silent. She had Cora in a county hospital with a midwife she would never see again, and she had held her daughter and looked at those eyes, and she had made a promise she was not sure she could keep. I will make this right someday. I don't know how, but someday. She had spent the years since then figuring out how. Dominic Reyes' brother had been convicted 18 months ago. The SEC investigation, which had ultimately found Marcus's business partner guilty and Marcus innocent, had concluded 2 years before that. She had followed every step of it from a distance, through news alerts set up on a library computer in the city where she'd been living. She had read the verdict on her phone in the break room of the diner where she'd been waitressing, and she had sat very still for a long time. The threat was gone. Reyes had no more leverage. She had waited anyway. Another year, 2 years, because she was careful, because she had a child to protect, because certainty is not something you rush into when the stakes are this specific. And then Cora had gotten sick. Not deathly sick. Not the kind of sick that the word conjures in the dark places of parental imagination, but chronically sick, a structural irregularity in her heart, a small defect, nothing that required surgery now, but something that required monitoring, required a specific specialist, required regular appointments and careful management, and a doctor who knew her case from the inside out. Dr. Alvarez, on the 4th floor of the Kane Medical Center, was the only doctor within 300 miles who fit that description. So she had come here. She had made the only logical choice available to her, which was to come to this hospital and get this job and get her daughter this doctor and deal with whatever else came from that decision when it arrived. It had arrived. It was wearing a charcoal suit and Italian leather shoes, and it had those gray eyes that her daughter had inherited, and it had said, "We're going to talk," and it had been right. She tucked the last corner of the hospital bed. She gathered the old linens. She pushed her cart to the next room. She worked. On the 6th floor, in his private office. Every floor of the Kane Medical Center had a room that was technically a small conference space, but was functionally Marcus Kane's office when he was in the building. Marcus sat with Harrington. The floor was empty except for the two of them. The staff had gone. The conference had ended. Harrison and the rest of the team had taken their reports and their anxious hairlines and their questions, and they had gone. And Marcus had said to Harrington, quietly, "Stay," and Harrington had stayed. Harrington had been with Marcus for 9 years. He had been hired before the hospital was even finished. Hired away from Johns Hopkins, which had taken considerable effort and a very good conversation about what Marcus was trying to build and why. Harrington was 61 years old, and he had the manner of a man who had seen everything medicine and human nature could show a person, and had come through it not cynical, but very, very calm. He was calm now, sitting across from Marcus, waiting, who approved the hire of the new aide in the private wing. Marcus said, "The one who's been here 4 months." Harrington did not blink. Personnel decisions at that level are handled by administration. He said, I can get you the file. I know you can, Marcus said. I'm asking who specifically approved it. Harrington was quiet for a moment. I can find out, he said. I also want to know how she came to apply here. Marcus said, specifically, whether she requested this wing or was assigned. Harrington was looking at him steadily. Marcus, he said, the first-name basis, which Harrington deployed rarely and with surgical precision. Is there something happening here I should know about? Marcus looked at the window. Outside, the city was doing what cities do, moving, making noise, existing at its usual scale, indifferent to the events inside any given building within its borders. She and I have a history, Marcus said. How much history? Harrington said. Enough, Marcus said. Harrington was quiet. She's good at her job? Marcus asked. From what I've seen, yes. The patients in the private wing respond well to her. She's thorough. She's quiet. She's very. He paused. What? Marcus said. Careful? Harrington said. She's very careful. About everything. Marcus turned from the window. I'm not going to fire her, he said, if that's what you're thinking. I'm not thinking anything. Harrington said. I just need to understand the situation. Marcus said. Harrington nodded. And the child, Marcus said. The little girl. Does she come here regularly? Harrington paused again. This pause was different. This was the pause of man making a decision. I believe, he said slowly, that she is a patient of Dr. Alvarez's. On the 4th floor. I believe she has an appointment schedule of some kind. Marcus was very still. What is she being treated for? He said. Harrington said nothing. Harrington, Marcus said. I can't tell you that. Harrington said. And you know I can't tell you that. And you also know that if you ask Dr. Alvarez directly, he will tell you the same thing. And you know that if you try to access those records through any administrative channel, you will be in violation of about 17 federal privacy regulations that I helped write into this hospital's founding charter. He paused. So I would suggest, he said, that if you want to know about that little girl's medical situation, you ask her mother. Marcus held his gaze. Yes, he said. I know. He stood up. He looked at the window again for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket. Don't have her reassigned, he said. Don't change her schedule. Don't do anything that would affect her employment. Of course not, Harrington said. And don't tell anyone we had this conversation. Harrington tilted his head slightly. When have I ever, he said. Marcus almost smiled. That was the closest Harrington ever got to a joke. He had learned over 9 years to recognize it. He put his jacket on. He rode the elevator down.
He stood in the lobby for a moment. The lobby of his hospital, with its clean lines and its good light and its flowers and its engraved mission statement on the wall. Excellence, without exception. Care, without conditions. And he looked at it, really looked at it, the way you stop seeing the things you build once they become familiar. Then he walked out. His car was waiting. His driver was waiting. He got in. He said the address of his apartment. The driver drove. And Marcus Kane rode through the city in the back of a black car and looked at nothing and thought about everything. About a face he had seen in the first hallway. About a pair of gray eyes on a 6-year-old girl. About a note. 6 words. He had kept it. God help him, he had kept it. Not because he was sentimental, not because he was weak, but because at some point in the 2nd year after she left, when he was starting to be able to function again, he had found it in the box where he had thrown everything from that day, and he had stood in his kitchen at 2 a.m. and he had read it again, and he had known, for the first time, with a certainty that he could not fully explain and could not have defended in any logical argument, that it was not the whole truth. I'm sorry. I just don't love you. It was 6 words, and she had written them, and they were in her handwriting, and he had believed them for about 18 months before something in him had stopped believing them and started asking different questions. She hadn't cried. He had been told, gently, carefully, by the flower girl's mother who had handed him the note, that she had not been crying, that she had been very calm, that she had looked, the woman said, with a strange expression on her face, like someone who has already done their crying and now has to do the thing they have been crying about. He had thought about that for years. Someone who has already done their crying. He had let himself believe that this meant she had simply known earlier than he did that it was wrong, known and been too afraid to say it, known and processed it alone, and then made the only decision available to her. He had worked very hard to be generous about it.
He had not always succeeded.
But he had tried.
And now?
Now she was in his hospital. Now there was a little girl with his eyes. Now there were questions that made the note look like a small piece of a much larger puzzle, and he was sitting in the back of this car arranging the pieces, and the picture they were making was not simple, and it was not comfortable, and it was, in some way he could not yet define, both better and worse than the story he had been telling himself for 6 years. He arrived at his apartment. He went upstairs. He made himself a drink he did not want. He stood at the window and looked at the city. He picked up his phone. He put it down. He picked it up again. He did not call her. He did not have her number. He had deleted it a long time ago in an act of painful self-discipline, but he did something else. He called Harrison. Harrison, he said when the young man picked up on the first ring. The patient list I asked for. Dr. Alvarez's roster. Sir, Harrison said carefully. I need it. Sir, the privacy. Harrison. There was a silence. The listed patients in Dr. Alvarez's caseload under age 10, Harrison said finally, I can tell you their first names only. No last names. No diagnoses. That's the absolute limit of what I can provide without.
Fine, Marcus said.
Fine. There is one child he sees with any significant regularity, Harrison said. She's 6. Her name is Cora. Marcus closed his eyes. He stood at his penthouse window with his eyes closed and his drink getting warm in his hand and the city laid out below him in its millions of lit squares, and he breathed. Thank you, Harrison, he said. He hung up. He stood there for a very long time. Then he went to bed. He did not sleep. In a different part of the city, Vivian was reading to Cora. They were in Cora's room, which was small and carefully arranged. The kind of room that a mother with limited resources and unlimited love creates for her child, where everything is chosen with intention, where the walls have drawings taped in neat rows, and the bookshelves are made of crates stacked on their sides, and the nightlight throws a warm circle of gold on the ceiling. Vivian was reading from the book Cora had chosen, which was the same book she had been choosing for 3 weeks, a picture book about a fox who lived alone at the edge of a wood and who gradually, over the course of many small adventures, learned how to let the other animals in. It was not a long book. They had read it perhaps 15 times at this point. Vivian knew every word. She read it anyway, because this is what you do when you love someone small. You read the book they choose as many times as they choose it, because what they are really asking for is not the story but the presence. They want you there, your voice, your warmth, the fact of you beside them in the small circle of the nightlight. Cora fell asleep on the second-to-last page, the way she sometimes did, her head against her mother's arm and her breath going slow and even. Vivian stayed where she was. She looked at her daughter. She did this sometimes, just looked. Took inventory of this specific small miracle, the weight of her, the trust of her, the absolute animal trust of a sleeping child who has no doubt that the world is safe right now because someone who loves her is nearby. She looked at Cora's eyes closed. She knew what they looked like open. She thought about tomorrow. She thought about Marcus's face in the hallway, the way the expression had moved through it and then been controlled, the way he had said we're going to talk, not a threat but a fact, delivered with that quiet certainty that was so specifically him, so thoroughly Marcus, that she had felt it like a hand on her sternum. She thought about Dominic Reyes in prison now, 12 years, federal, white-collar crimes compounded by a separate financial fraud charge that had added 4 more years to his sentence. He was done. He was contained. He could not touch her. She thought about the SEC investigation, concluded and resolved, Marcus's name cleared completely, his partner convicted, the whole apparatus of that threat dismantled and gone. She thought about how long she had waited for those 2 things to be true before she had allowed herself to come anywhere near his orbit. She had been careful. She had been so careful for so long. And now here she was, and the moment was here, and the moment was going to require something of her that careful could not provide. It was going to require the truth. The whole truth. Not the 6-word version. The real version, with all its ugly mechanics, all its impossible choices, All the places where she had been wrong and the places where she had been right and the places where right and wrong had been indistinguishable, and she had done the best she could with the information she had and the resources she had and the time she had. The truth was going to be very hard to say, and it was going to be very hard for him to hear. She knew that. She had been sitting with that knowledge for 6 years. She had been prepared for a version of this for almost as long. She thought about what his face had looked like when he looked at Cora. That expression, the one that had lived underneath all the others, raw and unguarded and gone in a second. She had not been able to name it when she saw it. She could name it now, lying in her daughter's small room with the night light making its gold circle on the ceiling. That expression was recognition. He had recognized something in Cora. He did not know yet what he was recognizing or why or what it meant, but something in him knew. Something in him already knew. She pressed her lips to her daughter's hair. She turned out the night light. She went to her own room, which was smaller than Cora's because she had given Cora the bigger one. She lay down. She set her alarm. She went to sleep. She did not dream, or if she did, the dreams had the decency to be gone by morning. The next morning was a Tuesday. Vivian arrived at the Kane Medical Center at 6:45, 15 minutes before the start of her shift, because she was always 15 minutes early and had been since the first week, when her supervisor, a small brisk woman named Darlene who wore reading glasses on a chain and had the organizational capacity of a military general, had told her that in this wing, early was on time and on time was late. She had been early every day since. She clocked in. She collected her assignment sheet. She started in room 2, which was her usual starting point, a patient named Mr. Whitfield who was 83 and had had a hip replacement and was opinionated about the hospital breakfast and liked to talk and had, over 4 months, developed a warmth for Vivian that she returned genuinely. "Good morning, Mr. Whitfield," she said. "You're late," he said. He said this every morning.
"I'm early," she said.
She said this every morning. "My breakfast was cold," he said. "What did they bring you?"
she said.
He told her. She listened. She moved through the routine of his room, fresh water, clean surfaces, adjusted blinds, a brief conversation about his daughter who was coming to visit on Thursday, and she was aware, at every moment, of the quietness of the hallway outside. She was aware that he might come back today. She was aware that he had said "we're going to talk," and that "we're going to talk" was not a phrase that meant "we're going to talk someday eventually when it's convenient." It was a phrase that meant soon. She worked through rooms 2 and 3 and 4. She was in room 5 when she heard the elevator. She did not look at the door. She kept working. She told herself she was not listening and then admitted to herself that she was absolutely listening, that every cell of her was oriented toward that hallway, that her body had developed an awareness of this specific man's presence that 6 years had apparently done nothing to diminish. His footsteps were different from the staff's footsteps. The staff had the easy rhythm of people who belong to a space, familiar, unhurried, moving through known territory. His footsteps had the deliberate quality of ownership, of a man who could move through any space this way because he had decided he owned not just this building but a particular relationship with forward motion. She had once found this quality deeply attractive. She was finding it deeply terrifying right now. The footsteps stopped at the door of room 5. She turned around. He was not in the charcoal suit today. He was in a dark navy one, same collar, same one button open, same Italian shoes. He had a coffee cup in one hand. He looked like he had slept as much as she had, which was to say not much.
"Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said.
He looked at the room briefly. At the patient who was sleeping. His voice dropped. "I was hoping we could talk," he said. "When you have a break." She looked at him for a moment. She thought about all the reasons not to. She thought about Cora. She thought about 6 years. "My break is at 10, she said. "There's a room at the end of the hall," he said. "I'll be there." She nodded. He left. She stood very still for a moment. Then she went back to work. 10 o'clock arrived with the inevitability of all things you dread, which is to say it arrived exactly when it was supposed to, neither faster nor slower, indifferent to the fact that she would have traded almost anything for another hour. She walked to the end of the hall. The room was a small sitting area. She knew it. It was used for family consultations, comfortable chairs and a low table and a box of tissues and windows overlooking a garden that was, in May, actually quite beautiful, though she had never sat in this room long enough to appreciate the garden.
She went in.
He was there. He was standing at the window. He turned when she came in. They looked at each other. She sat down. She had decided to sit down, to not have this conversation standing in a doorway, to give it the weight of stillness. After a moment, he sat too. Across from her. He set his coffee on the low table. He looked at her. She looked at him. She let him start. It was the least she could do. I have been thinking, he said, since yesterday, about the best way to do this. And I haven't found one. So, I'm just going to ask you directly. Okay, she said. Is Cora my daughter? She had known this was the question. She had known it since yesterday afternoon. She had known it for 6 years. She held his gaze.
Yes, she said.
The room was very quiet. He was still. That stillness. That specific, controlled, managed stillness that she remembered and feared, and even now, even here, could not help finding something close to beautiful in its absolute economy. He was quiet for so long that she started to count the seconds without meaning to. She got to 22.
You knew, he said, when you left. You knew. No, she said. I found out after. But she's his daughter. Yes, she was absolutely his. There had been no one else. There had never been anyone else during the years they were together. It was simply not in her nature, and it was not something he had ever had any reason to doubt, and she could see that he did not doubt it now. He closed his eyes. She watched him. She saw something move through his face. Something seismic. Something large. Something that was not just one feeling, but the layered accumulation of multiple feelings arriving simultaneously and competing for space. And she did not look away, even though looking away would have been easier, because she owed him at minimum the witnessing of this. The least she could do was stay present for it. When he opened his eyes, there were no tears. Not because he was not feeling what would warrant them, but because this was Marcus, and Marcus did not cry in front of people. He had learned not to somewhere in his childhood, and it had become structural. But his voice, when he spoke, had changed. 6 years, he said. I know, she said. 6 years, Vivian. I know. She's been alive for 6 years, and I haven't. His jaw tightened. He stopped. He picked up his coffee. He set it back down without drinking it. Why, he said. And this was the question that mattered. This was the one that required the full answer, not the 6-word version. She took a breath, and she told him. She told him about the restaurant with the tablecloths she could not afford. She told him about Dominic Reyes and the dessert he had eaten so calmly while he dismantled her future. She told him about the SEC investigation. Told him how much she had known, how Reyes had laid it out for her in specific detail, how she had not known if the information was entirely accurate, but had not been able to afford the possibility that it wasn't. She told him about sitting in the bridal suite at the Fairmont Hotel at midnight before the wedding, going through everything Reyes had told her, running the calculation that she had run over and always arrived at the same place. She told him about the note. She told him how many versions she had written. She told him about the 6 words and how she had chosen them with a specific and terrible precision. Not because she was trying to be cruel, but because kindness would not have worked, because any softening of the blow would have left with hope, and hope would have meant contact, and contact would have meant Reyes, and Reyes would have meant the investigation going the other way. She told him about finding out she was pregnant. She told him about the decision not to call. She did not make it sound noble. She did not dress it up. She laid it out the way it actually was. A frightened 26-year-old woman, alone, 3 states away, 8 weeks pregnant, in a studio apartment with a leaking radiator, doing the best she could with the information she had, and arriving at a decision that she has not been certain was right since the moment she made it. She told him about watching the investigation from a distance, following every development, watching his partner get convicted, watching him get cleared, watching Reyes' brother go to prison, and then watching Reyes himself go to prison on the separate charges. She told him about waiting 2 more years because she was careful, and she had a child, and she did not act on incomplete certainty. She told him about Cora getting sick. She told him about Dr. Alvarez. She told him that she had come here, to his hospital, not to find him, not to make anything right, not to present him with the daughter he had missed, not to ask for anything or confess anything or repair anything. She had come here because this was the only hospital in this city with a specific doctor, and her daughter needed this specific doctor, and everything else was secondary to that. She stopped. She had said everything. The room held the shape of everything she had said. Marcus had not moved for the entire duration of her speaking. He had sat with his hands flat on his thighs and his eyes on her face, and he had listened with the focused completeness that was one of the things she had first noticed about him. He listened the way some people pray, with his whole body. Now the silence was full. She waited. "Reyes," he said. "Yes, I know that name," he said. "I know who he is." She looked at him. "I know, because when the investigation was concluded," she said carefully, "your name was cleared and his brother was convicted. I investigated it myself," Marcus said. "Afterward, 2 years after, I had a private investigator go back through the entire timeline of what happened with my partner and the accounts and how the SEC investigation started, and who might have had a reason to." He stopped. His jaw was tight. "I couldn't make it add up," he said. "There were pieces that didn't fit. I could never find the thread that connected them." He looked at her. "You were the thread," he said. She held his gaze. "I'm sorry," she said. She had said it before, in the letter. 6 words, including that one. But this sorry was different. This sorry was a real version, the full weight, the one she'd been carrying around. He looked at the window. She watched him. This was the moment. This was the moment she had not been able to predict, the moment her calculations had always stopped at. Because you could not calculate this part. You could not calculate what a person would do with the truth when the truth was this particular truth, with this particular architecture, delivered 6 years and 1 daughter too late. She waited. He stood up. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her for a long time. She gave him the time. "You made this decision," he said, "without telling me." "Yes," she said. "You decided you knew what I would choose." "I knew what Reyes would do if I told you," she said. He was watching. He said he'd know if there was contact. Did he say how? No. He was probably bluffing, Marcus said. She looked at her hands. "Maybe," she said. "I can be sure." And if he wasn't bluffing, he turned around. "If he wasn't bluffing, you chose to take the risk yourself," he said. "You chose to be the one who—" His voice stopped. He looked at her with those eyes. "You were trying to protect me," he said. She said nothing. "You sacrificed." His voice was changing. "You gave up everything. The wedding. Our life. 6 years. You raised my daughter alone. You worked in hospitals. And you did all of it because you were afraid that if you didn't, I would go to prison." She was looking at him steadily. "You were 26 years old," he said. She said nothing. He looked at her for a long time. "I don't know," he said quietly, "whether I am angry at you for not telling me or more." He stopped. Something went through his face. "More humbled than I have ever been in my life," he said, "by what you did." She blinked. He sat back down, not across from her, next to her. The chair was close enough. He looked at his hands. "Where is she now?" he said. "Right now." "School," Vivian said. "She goes to the elementary school 2 blocks from where we live. She gets out at 3. Does she know?" he said. "About me." Vivian was quiet for a moment. "She knows she has a father," she said. "She has always known that. I told her that her father was a good man, and that the situation was complicated, and that she would understand more when she was older. She has never asked me for his name. I have thought about that a lot. I think she is waiting until she is ready." He was very still. "She's healthy?" he said. "Her heart." "Manageable," Vivian said. That's the word Dr. Alvarez uses. Manageable. It's a structural irregularity that needs monitoring. She may need a procedure when she's older, possibly a small intervention when she's in her teens. But right now it's manageable, and she is otherwise completely healthy, and she is... She paused. She smiled. It was the first time she had smiled in this conversation, and it changed her face completely. "She is extraordinary," Vivian said. "She is the funniest person I know. She has opinions about everything. She corrects adults when they get facts wrong very politely but very firmly. She draws constantly. She has an imaginary friend named Gerald who is, apparently, a retired pilot. She talks in her sleep." Marcus was looking at her with that unnameable expression again. He has inherited it, she realized. She's 6 years old, and she's already a force of nature. She paused. She has your eyes, she said. I think you might have noticed. He looked at the window. I noticed, he said. They sat. The garden outside was very green. I don't know how to do this, he said. I want to be very honest with you about that. I am sitting here, and there are approximately 40 things happening inside me, and I cannot sort them into any order that makes sense. And I'm a person who sorts things into order for a living. She nodded. I'm not asking you for anything, she said. I want to be clear about that. I came here for Cora's doctor. I did not come here to present you with a situation or make demands or... I'm not here to disrupt your life. His head turned toward her sharply. She's my daughter, he said. Yes, she said. Then she's already my life, he said. Whatever I was before you walked down that hallway is already different. You understand that? She looked at him. I know, she said quietly. He stood again. This time emotion was less controlled. There was something in it that felt closer to what was actually happening inside him, the overflow of 6 years of math arriving all at once. I need time, he said. Take it, she said. I need to. He stopped. I need to process this in a way that is fair to her, to Cora, because whatever I decide and whatever we decide and however we handle this, I am not going to be someone who... He stopped again. She waited. I am not going to be someone who makes this about me. He said finally, it's not about me, it's about her. She looked at him and felt something shift in her chest that was not exactly relief, and not exactly grief, but something in between. The feeling of a structure that has been holding up weight for a very long time and has now been told it can put some of that weight down. Okay, she said. Can I meet her? He said. She blinked. She had expected this eventually. She had not expected it this soon. Not today. He read her expression. Not today, he said. I know. Not like this. But soon. She thought about Cora, about how Cora read faces, about how Cora would read this man's face, and what she would find there. Yes, she said. Soon. He nodded. He picked up his coffee. He looked at it. This is cold, he said. She almost laughed again. The right kind this time. The surprise kind that comes from unexpected, ordinary things arriving in the middle of extraordinary ones. There's a coffee station at the end of the hall, she said. He looked at her. A beat, too. He almost smiled. Just almost. Then he walked out. She sat in the consultation room for a moment longer. Outside, the garden was very green. She thought, well, that happened. She thought, now what? Now what was, as it turned out, approximately 900 more complications. Because this was not the end of anything. This was the beginning of something she had no map for. She had a map for running. She had a map for hiding. She had a map for surviving alone. She had a map for particular geography of single motherhood and medical anxiety and grocery budgets and bus schedules and all the small daily logistics of building a life with limited resources and unlimited intention. She did not have a map for this. She went back to work. Marcus, meanwhile, went to the 4th floor. He went to the 4th floor, and he stood outside the door of Dr. Alvarez's office for 37 seconds. He did not count, but he was a man who understood himself, and he knew he had stood there long enough for the standing itself to become a decision. And then he knocked. Dr. Alvarez was not what Marcus had expected. He was small and compact, and somewhere in his late 40s, with the careful eyes of a specialist and the unpretentious manner of someone who had decided a long time ago that what mattered was the work. He looked up when Marcus came in. Mr. Kane, he said. He did not look surprised. Exactly. He looked like a man who had made some calculations of his own. I want to talk to you about a patient, Marcus said. Alvarez folded his hands on the desk. I can't discuss individual patients' medical information with you, he said. You know that. I'm not asking for medical information, Marcus said. I'm asking you to tell me how serious it is. Alvarez was quiet. I'm asking you, Marcus said, as the man who built this hospital, as the man who funded your department and will continue to fund your department, as the man who made it possible for you to do the work you do here, I'm asking you to tell me if she's going to be all right. He paused. Alvarez, he said, is she going to be all right? Alvarez looked at him for a long time. Then he said, in general, children with a condition who receive consistent, high-quality monitoring and care do very well. Marcus heard what was between the words. Consistent, he said. Yes, Alvarez said. Consistent. High quality, Marcus said. He nodded. What happens if she doesn't have that? Marcus said. The complications, Alvarez said carefully, are manageable when managed. When not managed, they are less so. Marcus was very still. What does she need that she doesn't currently have? He said. Alvarez looked at the window. Her current coverage, he said slowly, is adequate. It's not comprehensive. There are gaps. What kind of gaps? The kind, Alvarez said, that a child with her mother's insurance situation cannot fully bridge. We're working within constraints. Marcus held his gaze. Those constraints can change, he said. It was not a question. Alvarez looked at him. I expect they will, he said. Marcus stood up. I'll have my administrator contact you, he said, about updating her coverage situation. I want a comprehensive. I want everything she needs available to her without, he paused, without her mother having to choose between things. Alvarez nodded. He was quiet for a moment. Mr. Kane, he said. Marcus looked at him. She's a remarkable little girl, Alvarez said. She comes in here and she tells me about her imaginary friend. He's a retired pilot. Yes, Marcus said. I heard. He's apparently had some very interesting adventures, Alvarez said. Marcus walked to the door. I'll bet, he said. He walked out. He stood in the hallway of the 4th floor. Around him the hospital moved in its usual rhythms. The brisk step of nurses, the measured pace of doctors, the particular quiet of a medical institution that is full of life and full of crisis and has developed, institutionally, a very specific relationship with both. He had built this place. He had built it because his father had died in a hospital that was not good enough, in a room that was not clean enough, attended by doctors who were stretched too thin, and Marcus had been 22 years old, and there had been nothing he could do about it then. But he had decided standing in that corridor 20 years ago that someday he would build something better, and he had spent the next 20 years doing exactly that. He had built it for the right reasons. He had always known that. He had never quite understood, until now, standing in the corridor of the 4th floor, that the building he had built to address one loss had been the thing that brought back another. She came to his hospital, because it was the best hospital, because his hospital was the best hospital, because he had built the best hospital. There was something in that, some logic, some irony, some kind of structure, that he could not quite see the edges of yet, but that he felt the way you feel the shape of a large thing in the dark before you can see it. He went downstairs. He found Harrington. He said, I need her benefits updated. Comprehensive. For her and her daughter. Retroactive to her hire date, if legally possible. Harrington looked at him. Done, he said. I also, Marcus said, want a meeting set up with her, outside the hospital, not during work hours, not in a professional setting. Harrington continued to look at him. Should I be concerned about any of this? He said. No, Marcus said. Harrington tilted his head. I'll let her know, he said. I'll let her know myself, Marcus said. Harrington tilted his head the other way. All right, he said. Marcus walked away. Harrington watched him go. Then he went back to his office, sat down, looked at the ceiling for 30 seconds, and said, to no one in particular, well, the next 3 days were the strangest 3 days of Vivian's professional life, and she had once worked a double shift in an understaffed ER during a city-wide power outage. So her threshold for strange was not low. Marcus came to the private wing every day. He did not seek her out. He did not hover. He did not do anything inappropriate or pressuring or professionally complicated. He came to the wing and he did his actual business. He met with staff. He reviewed renovation plans. He sat in on a case review meeting that he had apparently been scheduled for before any of this. And he was always very correct, very professional, very Marcus. But he was there, and she felt it. The way you feel a change in atmospheric pressure. Not dramatically, not a thunderclap. Just the quality of the air becoming something slightly different. Something that your body registers before your mind does. On the second day, as she was leaving for a break, she found a coffee on the supply station counter near the end of the hall. It was from the good place downstairs, not the hospital drip, and it was in a cup of the sleeve, and it had exactly 2 sugars and no cream, which was how she had always taken her coffee, which she had never mentioned to anyone in this building. She stood there for a moment, looking at it. She picked it up. It was good coffee. She drank it. On the third day, after her shift ended and she was walking to the lobby toward the exit, she heard her name, Vivian. She turned. He was standing near the reception desk, jacket on, apparently also leaving. She waited. He walked over. There's a place, he said, 2 blocks east. They have good food, and it's quiet, and I'd like to talk to you there when you're ready. She looked at him. Not tonight, she said. He looked at her. Cora gets out at 3, she said. I have to pick her up and make dinner, and I know, he said. Whenever. She thought about it. She thought about running. She thought about the fact that she was done running. She thought about Cora. Tomorrow, she said. I can do tomorrow. Late morning. I'm on the late shift this week. He nodded. 11, he said. 11, she said. He nodded again. He walked toward the revolving doors. She watched him go. She thought, this is happening. She went home. She made pasta. She helped Cora with homework that was about addition and subtraction, but which Cora was treating with the gravity of a doctoral defense. She bathed her. She read the Fox book. She listened to 20 minutes of enthusiastic reporting on Gerald, the retired pilot's latest adventure, which had apparently involved a helicopter, a cheese shop, and a misunderstanding with a customs official. She lay in the dark of her own room, and she thought about tomorrow. And then, because she was Vivian, and she had always been better at doing than worrying, she went asleep. The restaurant was a kind she had not been to in years. Not expensive, exactly, but chosen. The kind of place where the tables have cloth napkins, and the menu is not laminated. She found him already there, which she had expected. He was always early. She was always 15 minutes early. She had been 15 minutes early, and he had been 20. He stood when she came in. He did not need to do that. She registered that he had done it anyway. They sat. A waiter came. They ordered. She ordered the soup and a coffee. He ordered something she did not pay attention to because she was too busy managing the strangeness of sitting across a table from him in a non-hospital context for the first time in 6 years. When the waiter left, he looked at her. I've been thinking, he said. Okay, she said. I've been thinking about what you told me. And I've been thinking about what I want and what would be, he paused, what would be right, not just for me, for Cora, and for you. She waited. I want to know her, he said. I want to be part of her life. I don't know what that looks like yet, because I've never, he stopped. I've never done this. I don't have a frame of reference for this. But I want it. I know that. She nodded. What I don't want, he said, is for this to be complicated for her. She's 6. She doesn't need complicated. She needs stability. I agree, Vivian said. So I want to take it slowly, he said. I want to let her lead. I'm not going to walk in and announce. He stopped. I want to meet her as a person first, as someone her mother knows, and we can figure out the rest from there. She looked at him. That's thoughtful, she said. He looked at the table. I'm very angry, he said. She went still. Not at you, he said quickly. At the situation. At Reyes. At myself for not knowing something was wrong, for not following the thread far enough. For not. He stopped. I keep thinking about what you were carrying. At 26. Alone. And I keep thinking about what you chose instead of the easier thing. The easier thing, she said. You could have told me, he said. You could have called me and told me everything about Reyes and let me handle it. And maybe I would have gone to prison, and maybe I wouldn't. But you chose to carry it yourself. I chose to protect you, she said. You chose to make the decision for both of us, he said. His voice was not unkind. It was precise. And I need to say that, because it's true. You made a decision that should have been mine too. She held his gaze. You're right, she said. He blinked. He had not expected that. I know, she said. I knew it then. I didn't have another option I could see. But I knew I was taking something from you that wasn't mine to take. I've known it every day since. He was quiet. She looked at her coffee. If I could have done it differently, she said, I would have the version where I called you and we figured out together, and you didn't have to build everything from scratch. That version is what I wanted. I wanted that version. I loved you. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. The room was very quiet for a moment. His jaw moved, then was still. I know, he said. She looked up. I know, he said again. I stopped believing the note a year and a half after I got it. I didn't know what was actually true. I just knew that note wasn't. She looked at him. You could have looked for me, she said, not as a criticism, as an observation. I could have, he said. He paused. I chose not to, because if I was wrong and you had simply left, finding you had broken something in me that I wasn't sure I could put back together. So I chose to. He stopped. I chose to build things instead. She understood this completely. You're good at building things, she said. He looked at her. I'm better at it than I used to be, he said. I had extra time to practice. The delivery was so dry, so specifically him, that she laughed. A real laugh, the kind she had not expected. He looked at her when she laughed. Something happened in his face that was not quite a smile, but was a thing that comes before a smile. Their food arrived. They ate. And for a little while, in the middle of everything that was complicated and unresolved and still very much in process, they ate soup and talked about ordinary things. He asked about her daughter's school, and she told him, and he told her about the hospital's West Wing renovation and what they were trying to build there, and she asked questions that showed she understood what he was trying to do, and he answered them, and somewhere in the middle of it, the thing between them that had always made conversation feel like breathing, easy, natural, mutual, started to do what it had always done. She thought, 6 years and it still does that. She thought, of course it does. He walked her out when they were done. On the sidewalk outside he paused. I'd like to take Cora for ice cream, he said. She looked at him. Nothing she hasn't been told, he said. Nothing complicated. Just ice cream with someone her mother knows. So she can get used to me before she has to figure out who I am. Vivian was quiet for a moment. She thought about Cora's face, the way she read people, the way she had looked at Vivian in that hospital hallway when she read something complicated in her mother's face and adjusted immediately to the new register. She's going to figure out who you are, Vivian said. She's very perceptive. He almost smiled again. She has your instincts then, he said. Or mine. Or both. Probably both, she said. He held her gaze for a moment. Saturday, he said. She thought. Saturday, she said. Good. He waited. She walked away. She did not look back, but she was smiling. Saturday was 4 days away, and in those 4 days the world continued to operate on its usual schedule. Her shifts, Cora's school, Dr. Alvarez's biweekly appointment, which happened on Thursday, and at which Alvarez reported that everything was stable and manageable, and that Cora had told him Gerald had resolved the situation with the customs official through skillful negotiation, and everyone had gone home happy. On Thursday afternoon, leaving the hospital with Cora's hand in hers, Vivian stopped at the reception desk to ask about something administrative regarding her benefits. Specifically about a change she had received notice of, a change to her coverage that now described it as comprehensive, that listed things as covered that had not been covered before. The administrator checked her file. That's correct, he said. Updated retroactively to your hire date. She stood very still. Did I request this? She said, knowing she had not. The administrator checked again. It came from the top, he said. Mr. Kane's office approved it. She looked at the administrator. The administrator looked back at her. She thought about going upstairs. She thought about finding him. She thought about what she would say. She thought about Cora's appointments without coverage gaps. She thought about Alvarez's word, comprehensive. She thought about 6 years of choosing between things. Thank you, she said to the administrator. She walked out. On the sidewalk, Cora said, Mama, you have your thinking face. Do I? Vivian said. You get 3 lines here. Cora said, and pressed one finger to the middle of Vivian's forehead. I do. Only when you're thinking something big. Vivian looked down at her daughter. Those eyes. I'm thinking something big. She agreed. What is it? She crouched down. She looked at her daughter's face. The cheekbones that came from her, the stubborn bottom lip that came from her, the eyes that came from somewhere else. Baby. She said, you know how I told you that your daddy was a good man? Cora's face did not change. She had not expected the question, but she did not startle. She processed it steadily, the way she processed everything. Yes, Cora said, I've been thinking about introducing you to someone. Vivian said carefully, someone I know, a very good person. And maybe if you like him, we can figure out more from there. How does that sound? Cora thought about this. Is it Gerald? She said. Vivian blinked. No, she said, because Gerald is imaginary. Cora said very seriously. I know that. I'm not a baby. I know you're not, Vivian said. So it's a real person. A real person, yes. Cora thought about this for another moment. Okay, she said. Okay, Vivian said. Yes. Can we have ice cream? Vivian held her daughter's face in her hands for a moment. Yes, she said. We can have ice cream. They had ice cream. Not yet the specific ice cream that was coming on Saturday, but their usual Tuesday ice cream. The little shop 3 blocks from their apartment where the owner knew Cora's order and sometimes snuck extra sprinkles when he thought Vivian wasn't looking. She let it happen. Extra sprinkles. Saturday arrived. Vivian had not slept particularly well on Friday night, but she had not expected to, and she had planned accordingly. She got up early. She made coffee. She sat at the kitchen table, and she breathed, and she made a mental list of everything she could control and everything she could not, and she decided to focus only on the former. She could control what she wore. She wore something comfortable and simple, jeans and a light sweater. She could control how she talked to Cora about it. She kept it light. There's a man Mama knows from work. His name is Marcus. He'd like to get ice cream with us. Is that okay? Cora had said yes, and immediately gone back to her drawing. She could not control how it would go. She could not control how Cora would respond. She could not control what Marcus would feel when he saw his daughter in daylight, outside a hospital, sitting across a table. She focused on the things she could control. Marcus had picked a place. A small ice cream shop near a park. Public, appropriate, neutral. He had chosen well. She recognized the deliberateness of the choice, the care that had gone into selecting somewhere with no weight, no history, no pressure. He was there when they arrived. He was standing outside, not inside, because of course he was, because standing outside meant that they arrived first, technically, that he had not already claimed the space, that the space was neutral. She noticed this. She filed it. He was wearing jeans and a dark shirt. No suit. She had not seen him without a suit or the memory of a suit in 6 years. He looked different. He looked like a person rather than a position. Cora was holding her hand. Cora saw him. She stopped walking. She looked at him. He looked at her. Vivian felt the moment stretch, felt it go very slow, felt the weight of everything contained within it, all the years and decisions and consequences and fears, all of it compressed into this single moment on a sidewalk outside an ice cream shop on a Saturday morning. Then Cora said, "You have eyes like me." Marcus went very still. "I do," he said. Cora considered this. "Not many people have eyes like mine," she said. "Mama's eyes are brown. Mine are gray. So are yours." "That's true," Marcus said. Cora looked at him for another moment. "Do you like ice cream?" she said. "Very much," he said. "What flavor?" He thought about it. "Butter pecan," he said. Cora's expression shifted. Something between surprise and approval. The expression of someone who has encountered an unexpected ally. "That's my second favorite," she said. "My first is strawberry, but butter pecan is very good." "I agree completely," Marcus said. Cora looked at her mother. "He seems okay," she said. Vivian cleared her throat. "Good," she said. They went in. They sat at a table in the corner, Cora between them, claiming the seat with the confidence of someone who has decided where everyone is going to sit without consulting anyone, and they ordered ice cream, and the conversation was, because Cora was there, wonderfully uncomplicated. Cora talked. She talked about school and about her teacher, Miss Patterson, and about a boy in her class named Devin who was her best friend, except when he used a red crayon first, and about Gerald, and about a book she was reading that was too easy, but she liked it anyway, and about the parking lot she had seen from the elevator at the hospital that looked like a toy set. Marcus listened. He was, Vivian noticed, very good at listening to a 6-year-old. He did not talk down to her. He did not ask the kind of questions that adults ask children as a way of demonstrating that they find the child interesting, without actually being interested. He was genuinely interested. She could see in the way his eyes tracked, the way he leaned very slightly forward, the way he asked follow-up questions about things Cora had said 2 minutes ago. Cora noticed, too. Cora had a barometer for this kind of attention. She had, from a very early age, the ability to tell the difference between people who listen and people who performed listening. She leaned toward people who actually listened. She always had. She leaned toward Marcus. About halfway through the ice cream, Cora paused in the middle of a sentence and looked at him. "Why do you know my mama?" she said. Marcus looked at Vivian. She looked back at him. "Your mama and I knew each other a long time ago," he said. "Before you were born." Cora thought about this. "Were you friends?" she said. "We were," Marcus said. "Very good friends." "Why aren't you friends now?" "Because we lost track of each other," he said. "The way people sometimes do." Cora considered this. "Gerald says," she said, "that if two people are really truly friends, they always find their way back." Marcus looked at her. "Gerald sounds wise," he said. "He is," Cora said. "He's very old. He's been around." Vivian was looking at her ice cream. She was not looking at Marcus. She was looking at her ice cream and thinking about Gerald and his very old wisdom and the way a 6-year-old had just said something that had no business being true, but was. And she was thinking about the way life occasionally does this. Takes an impossible thing and puts it in the mouth of a child and dares you to dismiss it. She did not dismiss it. She ate her ice cream. When they left, Cora took Marcus's hand. Not dramatically, not with any commentary. She simply reached up and took it as they walked the park, the way she sometimes took her mother's hand, the absolute unself-conscious ease of a child who had decided that a person is safe. Marcus looked down at his hand. He did not say anything. He walked. Vivian walked on the other side. In the park, Cora found the swings and commandeered them, and Marcus pushed her, which he had apparently never done before. She could see the moment he figured out the rhythm, the adjustment he made, the way his face changed. When Cora laughed at the height she was reaching and shouted again, "Go higher." He went higher. Vivian sat on a bench and watched. She thought about all the things that were still unresolved, all the conversations still ahead, all the truth still being absorbed, all the structure that still needed to be built between what they were and what they might become. There was so much still in front of them. There was still the explaining to do, to Cora at the right time, in the right way, with the right words. There was still the legal and logistical reality of what it meant for a man to step into a 6-year-old's life as her father. There were still the ways they had hurt each other, the choice she had made, the years he had lost, the things between them that forgiveness could address but could not erase. All of that was ahead. But right now, on this Saturday morning, there was a park and swings and a little girl with her mother's cheekbones and her father's eyes laughing at the top of her arc, and a man in dark jeans learning the rhythm of the push, and a particular quality of Maylight that makes everything it touches look like it was always supposed to be this way. She watched. She breathed. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A text from a number she did not recognize. "This is Harrington. I apologize for the informal contact. I wanted you to know, in my 9 years with Marcus Kane, I have watched him build something extraordinary from nothing. I have watched him do it with a kind of focused determination that I have never seen in another person. But I have never, in 9 years, seen him look the way he looked this week." She read it twice. She typed back, "How did you get my number?" 3 seconds. "The same way I know everything that happens in this hospital. Forgive the intrusion. Take good care of each other." She put her phone in her pocket. On the swings, Cora was telling Marcus about Gerald's adventure with the customs official. She was using her hands. She was very animated. Marcus was nodding and asking questions, and Cora was answering them with the grave thoroughness of a child who takes her story seriously. Take good care of each other. Vivian looked at them. She thought, "Okay." She thought, "Yes." She thought, "I think I can do that." There were hard things still ahead. She was not naive about this. The conversation with Cora, when the time came, was going to require things of both of them, clarity and patience and love, and a very careful attention to what a child can hold and how. The public reality of what this was, Marcus Kane and his daughter, the story that would become the story once it was known, was going to require navigation that she could not fully plan for yet. The thing between her and Marcus, whatever it was and whatever it might become, was going to need time and honesty and the kind of willingness to be imperfect in front of another person that she had not had to practice in a very long time. All of that was ahead. But here is what she had learned in 6 years of building a life out of materials available to her. You do not need to have the whole map. You need the next step. The next step was this park, this bench, these swings, this man learning to push her daughter toward the sky, this laughter. She breathed. She stayed. 3 weeks later, Marcus asked if he could come for dinner. He said it the way he said most things, directly, without preamble, in the parking lot of the hospital on a Wednesday afternoon as she was leaving her shift. Dinner, he said. She looked at him. At our place? She said, if that's all right. She thought about her kitchen, which was small. She thought about Cora, who would absolutely interrogate him about Gerald and the customs official and probably show him every drawing she had ever made. Saturday? She said. Saturday, he said. He came at 6. He brought flowers. Not roses, not the romantic kind, but a bright, chaotic handful of wildflowers in the market, the kind that looked like they'd been picked rather than arranged, and she recognized the choice immediately because she had told him once, years ago, that she found formal flower arrangements slightly oppressive and wildflowers happy. And the fact that he remembered this, had held this specific small fact across 6 years, and arrived at her door with exactly those flowers, did something to her chest that she chose, for now, not to name. He came inside. Cora immediately showed him every drawing she had ever made. He looked at every single one. He asked questions about each one. He spent 40 minutes on the floor of the living room going through a portfolio that Cora had assembled from a shoebox under her bed, listening to her explain each piece with the seriousness of a curator discussing a major collection. Vivian made pasta. She stood in the small kitchen and stirred sauce and listened to sounds from the living room. Her daughter's voice, animated and certain, and the quieter murmur of responses, and Cora's laughter at something he said, and she felt something that she would eventually find a word for. The word was home, not the apartment. She had made this apartment into a home over the months they had lived here, had put things on the walls and lightened the corners, and made it feel like theirs. The word did not mean the apartment. The word meant the sound of people she loved being in the same room. She stirred the sauce. She set the table. She called them for dinner. Cora sat between them. She ate most of her pasta and some of his bread because she had decided that his bread looked better than her bread, which was the same bread, and Marcus yielded his bread without comment, and Vivian did not point out that it was the same bread. After dinner, after Cora had been convinced that bedtime was not negotiable and had been read to Marcus, at Cora's invitation, read the Fox book, and he read it well, better than she had expected. He did the voices slightly differently than Vivian did them, and Cora approved of this enthusiastically. After the nightlight was on and the gold circle was on the ceiling, and Cora was asleep, Vivian and Marcus sat in the small living room. The apartment was quiet. Outside, the city did what cities do. They sat for a moment in the particular quality of quiet that follows the putting down of a child, that specific relief, that specific warmth, the sense of thing accomplished. She's extraordinary, he said. I know, Vivian said. He was quiet. She looked at the floor. He looked at the ceiling. I keep thinking, he said, about what I missed. She nodded. I can't get that back, he said. No, she said. So I'm trying to figure out, he said, how to be someone who is present now, without, he paused, without being someone who is trying to make up for time. Because you can't make up for time. And if you try, you make it weird. She looked at him. That's very self-aware, she said. I've been in therapy a lot, he said. She almost smiled. She has, she said. She's going to ask you to be Gerald for Halloween. He blinked. I'm sorry? She wants Gerald to be real, Vivian said. For Halloween, she wants someone to dress up as him. She's been asking me since February, and I've been deflecting, because I don't know how to be a retired pilot. He was looking at her. I could be Gerald, he said. She looked at him. He looked back. There was a long pause. You need to understand Gerald's backstory, she said. It's detailed. I have time, he said. She looked at him. He was serious. She laughed. She laughed, and it was the right kind, the surprised, delighted kind, the kind that comes when something unexpected is also exactly right. And he watched her laugh, and something in his face did the thing they'd been doing more often recently. The thing that was not quite a smile, but lived right next to one. Okay, she said. Okay, tell me what you know about Gerald, and we'll work from there. He thought. He's a retired pilot, Marcus said. He is, she said. He's been around, Marcus said. He has, she said. He has excellent negotiation skills, Marcus said, particularly in custom situations. Customs, she said. But yes. He looked at her. She looked at him. The city moved outside. The night light in the next room threw its gold circle on the ceiling. I need to tell you something, he said. His voice had changed, gone quieter, more careful, the voice he used when he was being precise about something that mattered. She waited. I'm not going to pretend, he said, that I have figured out what this is, what we are. I don't know that yet. There's too much, he gestured slightly at the air between them, at the weight of all the things that occupied that air. There's too much history and too much that's still being processed. For both of us. I know that. She nodded. But I want you to know, he said, that the reason I am sitting here in this apartment on a Saturday night after reading a book about a fox to my daughter. He paused on a word, and she heard him pause on it. And she saw what the word cost him and what it gave him simultaneously. Is not just because of her. It's also because of you. And I don't know yet what that means, but I think you deserve to know it's true. She looked at him. He looked back. The thing that she had been not naming sat in her chest and made the violent motion that had no name in any medical textbook. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She looked at him steadily. I'm not going to pretend either, she said, about any of it. So, okay. He held her gaze. Then he reached out. He laid his hand on the cushion between them, not reaching for her. Just there, available, present. She looked at his hand. She looked at him. She put her hand on the cushion next to his. Not touching, adjacent, also present. Outside, the city moved. The nightlight glowed. And somewhere in the space between what they had been and what they were becoming, in the small living room of a small apartment in a city that was indifferent to them and beautiful for it, two people who had hurt each other and been hurt and built things and lost things and found each other in a hospital hallway neither of them had been ready for, sat with their hands on the cushion between them, and let the quiet be the thing that it was, which was the beginning, not the middle, not the end, the beginning. And beginnings Vivian had learned. In 6 years of beginning again, in 6 years of the next step and the morning after, and the specific courage it takes to keep going when going is the only option left, beginnings were not the easy part. People thought they were. People thought endings were the hard part, the painful part, the part that required the most from you. But endings were just endings. They were over when they were done. Beginnings asked you to keep doing the hard thing, over and over, every day, in the absence of guarantees, in the presence of everything that could still go wrong, with no promise of outcome and no map for the territory ahead. Beginnings asked everything. She was still willing to pay. 6 months later, Cora sat in a chair in the living room of the small apartment, and she looked at her mother, and she looked at Marcus, and she said, with the directness of someone who has been thinking about something for a while and has decided it's time, "He's my dad, isn't he?" It was not a question. Vivian and Marcus looked at each other. Then they looked at Cora. "Yes," Vivian said, "he is." Cora thought about this for a moment. She looked at Marcus. "How come you weren't here before?" She said. "It's a long story," Marcus said. "But the short version is that your mom and I made some mistakes. Both of us. And now we're trying to do better." Cora considered this. "Gerald says," she said, "that everyone makes mistakes, and the important thing is what you do after." "That's correct," Marcus said. "Gerald is very smart," Cora said. "He really is," Marcus said. Cora thought some more. "Are you going to be here now?" she said. "Like regularly?" "If that's okay with you," Marcus said. "Yes." Cora looked at him. She looked at her mother. She looked at her hands. "Okay," she said, "but I have rules." Marcus leaned forward. "Tell me your rules," he said. "Rule 1. Cora said, "You have to read the Fox book the way you do it, not the way Mama does it." "No offense, Mama." "None taken," Vivian said. Rule 2. Cora said, "You have to try strawberry ice cream before you can say butter pecan is your favorite, because maybe you just haven't had the right strawberry." "That's fair," Marcus said. Rule 3. Cora said, and she looked at him very directly with those gray eyes, those serious eyes, the eyes that had always known more than they should. "You have to not leave again." The room was very quiet. Marcus looked at his daughter. He leaned forward. He said, That is the easiest rule to follow, because I have absolutely no intention of going anywhere. Cora looked at him. She had her mother's instincts. She decided she believed him. She held up her hand. Pinky swear, she said. He hooked his finger around hers. Pinky swear, he said. Vivian was looking at the ceiling. She was not crying. She was absolutely crying. She pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and breathed through it. And when she looked back down, her daughter was already off the couch and walking toward the kitchen, saying she wanted strawberry ice cream right now to begin the comparison study. And Marcus was standing, and there was a ghostly smile on his face, and he looked at Vivian across the room. She looked back. She took a breath. She stood up. She walked to the kitchen. She opened the freezer. She took out the ice cream. And they were, all three of them, in the small kitchen of the small apartment. The 6-year-old conducting a very serious comparative flavor study. The woman who had once made a terrible and necessary and loving choice, finding her way back to the person she had made it for. The man who had built something extraordinary in the absence of what he had lost, now standing in the presence of what had been waiting. And outside the city moved, and the light was the light of late afternoon in October. And it came through the kitchen window at that particular angle that makes ordinary kitchens look briefly, completely, like somewhere sacred. The ice cream was strawberry. The verdict, delivered with great gravity. I think, Cora said, looking at Marcus, that you were wrong about butter pecan. Marcus tasted the strawberry. He thought about it. He looked at Cora. I think, he said, you might be right. Cora beamed. She had her mother's smile. She had her father's eyes. She was entirely herself. And that, it turned out, was more than enough. It was, in fact, everything.